The inauguration of the discussion series on the national policy on social integration was held at the Lakshman Kadirgama Institute of International Relations and Strategic Studies in Colombo yesterday.
A gathering including the German ambassador to Sri Lanka, Dr. Jürgen Moad, was present for the discussion. The National Policy Framework for Social Integration was also launched under the theme Access for Everyone.
What is the purpose of social integration? I guess all of us answer it unanimously. It is social harmony and collective social achievement. It is inclusion, facilitate participation, ensure equality, and bridging the gaps caused by all kinds of alienation, while upholding our traditional values, ethics, education, which have helped us a long way in keeping our society integrated to the extent that we have it today.
Delivering the keynote address, Minister of External Affairs, Professor G.L. Piri, spoke on international influences on a country.
Every country has its own culture, has its own social organization. That is why I want to say that foreign intervention in those situations is entirely counterproductive. I mean, these are the nuances of the national culture, the national context are of overriding importance. And however well-intentioned some of these attempts may be, the perception is also important. As far as Sri Lanka is concerned, we scrupulously respect the identity of other nations. We do not comment on their domestic issues. We respect their independence, we respect their sovereignty, we respect their right to address sensitive issues in their countries in keeping with their own traditions and their own culture and the aspirations of their own people. And Sri Lanka expects reciprocity in that regard.
Amnesty International says that the upcoming Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting should not be allowed to take place in Sri Lanka in November unless systematic violations of human rights are stopped. Issuing a communique, AI states that journalists, the judiciary, human rights activists and opposition politicians are among those who have been targeted in a disturbing pattern of abuse.
According to Amnesty International's Deputy Asia-Pacific Director, Polly Trescott, there is a climate of fear with those brave enough to speak out against the government, often having to suffer badly for it. She states that the Sri Lankan government's blatant attempts to restrict and silence the independent media fly in the face of press freedom, which is supposed to be guaranteed by both domestic and international law. The AI Deputy Asia-Pacific Director states that all attacks on individuals must be promptly, impartially and effectively investigated and those responsible held to account. Trescott states that before November, Commonwealth governments must pressure the Sri Lankan government to address the alarming human rights situation in the country.
Notices were issued by the Supreme Court to former Chief Justice Dr. Shirani Bandaranaike and two parliamentarians to appear before court on the 29th of May. The notices were issued after considering a petition filed by the Attorney General.
The bench comprised of Justices Salim Marzouk, Satya Hettige and Eva Wanasundara. The Attorney General Palitha Fernando informed court that the former Chief Justice had submitted a writ petition to the appeals court during the impeachment process, requesting court to prevent the implementation of the report of the Special Parliamentary Select Committee. Here, the Attorney General added that the court issued a writ of certiorari informing the Speaker and the Special Parliamentary Select Committee not to implement the report that was tabled in Parliament relating to the impeachment of the former Chief Justice. The Attorney General submitted to court that the court cannot issue a writ to Parliament or make an order to Parliament to provide relief. The Attorney General noted that this was in contravention to Article 140 of the Constitution, and the decision of the Court of Appeal at that time sets out a bad precedent. Accordingly, the former Chief Justice and parliamentarians R. Sambandhan and Vijitha Herath were issued notices to appear before court on the 29th of May.
Well, up next is the newspaper cartoon of the day.
This year's Dutch National Day also marked the abdication of Queen Beatrix. The Queen's abdication gives the Netherlands its first king in over a century. Details coming up on the international desk.
In more local news, two of the suspects in the 3.7 billion rupee VAT tax fraud pled guilty before Colombo High Court Judge Kumuduni Vikramasinghe today. The two defendants were the Deputy Commissioner of Income Tax Anand Ambepitia and businessman S.M. Ashraf.
Representing the defendants in court today, President's Counsel Anil Silva said that his clients would be changing their pleas to guilty. Both defendants had originally entered pleas of not guilty. The second defendant, Ambepitia, was sentenced to 14 months in prison and was ordered to pay a fine of 500,000 rupees. In the event that the defendant fails to pay the fine, his prison sentence will be extended by 2 years. Ashraf, who is the 11th defendant in the VAT tax fraud case, was sentenced to 2 years in prison and was ordered to pay a fine of 60 million rupees. The judge also ordered that if the defendants fail to pay the fine, then his assets, which are currently in the custody of the Criminal Investigations Department, would be seized by the state.
The suspect in what is believed to be a triple murder in Karandenia was arrested by the police last night. The bodies of the three victims were brought to their home in Karandenia for the last time this afternoon.
The bodies of the mother, daughter and son were brought to their home this afternoon. The decaying corpses were discovered by the police on Sunday afternoon inside a house in the Akaravisa area in Kotavela, Karandenia. The police searched the building when area residents complained of an overwhelming stench emanating from the building. The police suspect that the trio were murdered about a week ago. The victims have been identified as a 39-year-old woman, her 9-year-old daughter and 7-year-old son. The police said that one of the bodies showed signs of injuries caused by a sharp weapon. The final rites were performed at the family burial grounds this evening. The children were students at the Maggala Junior School in Karandenia South. On a number of previous occasions, News First has reported on problems surrounding the disposal of waste. The Kantale-based hospital in the eastern province is also a backdrop for improper waste disposal. Our provincial correspondent Madhushankar Karivasam filed this report.
This is a waterway that is used by thousands of residents in this area. Wastewater from the Kantale hospital is released into this waterway from this point.
The entire village uses water from this waterway. Now the wastewater enters this well too.
Waste disposed of from the Kantale-based hospital has been flowing through the lands of area residents in this manner for several years. People living on the banks of the Navaraja Ala consume this water.
Only ordinary people live here. If there were influential people living here, this would have been stopped by now.
We informed the health officials, the Kantale police, the hospital, the district secretary and politicians, but there has not been a proper response. Waste is not disposed from the hospital toilets to the environment, but due to the drainage system, water is disposed. We held discussions regarding this with the Ministry of Health and decided to create a central drainage system.
Central drainage system
Incidentally, it is the Kantale-based hospital that has to bear the costs of treating residents who are taken ill through the consumption of the contaminated water.
According to the epidemiology unit of the Ministry of Health, an expectant mother infected with the influenza A virus is receiving treatment at an intensive care unit at a leading hospital in Colombo. Director of the epidemiology unit, Dr. Paba Paliyawardena, says that the Medical Research Institute has confirmed that the patient in question is infected with the influenza A virus.
Coughing, cold, high fever, chest pains and respiratory difficulties are some of the symptoms of the influenza A virus. Medical experts are of the view that the virus can transmit from person to person through a cold. Health experts say that the virus, which spreads twice a year, can spread more rapidly during the festive seasons when large crowds gather at a location.
Everybody will get this type of infection, but there are vulnerable groups in the society. That is those who are diabetic, elderly, children, and the pregnant patients who are beyond 28 weeks are the most susceptible. Now, if we are talking about why pregnant ladies are more vulnerable, because their immunity is depressed during pregnancy, and also they have breathing difficulties because of the enlarged uterus, and they have difficulty in breathing. So, whatever the chest infection causes a lot of discomfort and a lot of problems in the lungs when they are pregnant and especially after 28 weeks. So prevention number one is, I would say that if somebody is having this illness, especially I'm talking about pregnant mothers, I think should be isolated and get the advice from the specialists and then go for the treatment. The second is that if somebody is deteriorating the symptoms like getting worse, cough and fever, and don't wait and immediately get into the hospital, and that is one way of prevention, reduction of this complication.
Recently, 2 expectant mothers died after they were diagnosed with the influenza A virus.
An event to mark the National Day of the Netherlands was held in Colombo today. Politicians and dignitaries were present at this event.
The Netherlands has been an active partner in the development of Sri Lanka. Hundreds of millions have been invested, and most of these investments have borne fruit. Sri Lanka has become a middle-income country, and by now our development cooperation has largely come to an end. But the Netherlands would like to continue to be Sri Lanka's partner. We also continue to be a partner in business. Our 2 countries have strong commercial ties, trading more than $300 million in goods.
I am pleased to note the trade between 2 countries have continued to flourish over the centuries. People-to-people interactions between the 2 countries have also expanded vehemently, with the tourism industry in Sri Lanka gaining rapid momentum. The number of tourists from Netherlands to the island has also increased from 23,960 in 2011 to 26,750 in 2012. I firmly believe that the bonds of friendship and cooperation between Sri Lanka and the Netherlands will continue to expand in the years ahead.
An Indian and 2 Sri Lankan nationals have been arrested for allegedly assaulting a Malaysian politician in Bidor town in Perak state ahead of the May 5th polls in the country. According to a police spokesperson in Perak, the 32-year-old politician's car was blocked by 2 cars while he was driving to Bidor town yesterday. Foreign media reports that when the politician stepped out to question why he was being stopped, he was assaulted by the assailants. Police later arrested the 6 men, including the Indian and 2 Sri Lankan nationals. The suspects were not identified. Moving on to news from back here at home, at a media briefing convened today, General Secretary of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, Maithripala Sirisena, spoke on the preparations being made for the May Day by the United People's Freedom Alliance.
The theme of the rally and meeting for tomorrow will be Watanagana Mairala. A very important May Day rally and meeting will be held under the auspices of President Mahinda Rajapaksa, and we hope to pass a number of resolutions that will be of importance to the working masses. The resolutions that will be passed at the May Day rally will be of importance domestically and internationally. We have prepared resolutions regarding the economy of the country, the rights of the working masses, the development and the country, and establishing peace that is important internationally.
බලපාන්නා වූ කරුණු පිළිබඳව අපි ඒ වන විට යෝජනා සකස් කරලා තිබෙනවා.